I had never intended to go in. The shop had always been there, just off the main street, tucked between an old laundrette and a butcher's shop, its windows dusty and smeared, its sign barely visible through the fog of age and neglect. The Catalogue, it read, in fading letters that seemed to sag under the weight of their own existence. It was a place you didn't talk about. It wasn't even on the map. No one mentioned it, no one acknowledged it, but it was there, always there. Just like me, walking past it every day, pretending it didn't exist. I was supposed to be somewhere else that day, somewhere far from this place, but something in me made the decision. Maybe it was the pain, the emptiness that gnawed at my insides, the suffocating weight of decisions that had led me to this point. Or maybe it was just curiosity. Whatever it was, I found myself standing in front of the door, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the brass handle. The doorbell chimed with a sound that felt too loud in the silence. The air was thick, heavy, almost viscous. It smelled of must and something metallic, like the residue of forgotten things. I could feel the chill of the room pressing in from all sides, and as my eyes adjusted from the dim lighting, I saw him. He was behind the counter, tall and impossibly thin, like a shadow caught in the wrong light. His skin was pale, the kind of pale that looked like it hadn't seen the sun in decades. His eyes were the colour of fog, distant, as though they belonged to someone who had long since stopped caring. There was something about him that unsettled me, the way he stood perfectly still like a mannequin waiting to be placed in a display. I noticed an advertising posters on the wall for the services the shop provided. In big red writing, the posters read, 10% off for over 60s, and 50% off if the first time isn't a success. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. "You've come for the catalogue," he said, not a question but a statement, as though it were inevitable. I didn't answer. I was unsure how to respond. It felt as though my feet were frozen in place, my body refusing to follow my mind's commands. He slid a black leather-bound book across the counter. The book looked ancient, its surface cracked and worn, the pages yellow and brittle at the edges. There was something otherworldly about it, like it had been sitting there for centuries waiting for someone to open it, waiting for me. He didn't say anything else. I could feel his gaze on me as I hesitated. Then something in me gave in, and I opened the book. The first page was empty, and then the next, but soon the illustrations began. Detailed, precise drawings of the things I could hardly stomach, each one more grotesque than the last. I turned to the first section, the cheap ones, the ones that looked painful. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. A man was depicted being slowly crushed under the weight of a collapsing building, his bones shattered with every inch of pressure, his face frozen in an expression of raw terror. His body wasn't even fully crushed yet, but the pain was already unbearable. The description below it detailed the excruciating process, how every breath would feel like fire, how the mind would fracture under the weight, unable to comprehend the agony. And yet it was cheap. So cheap, the man behind the counter had said, as though this was just another commodity. I turned the page and my eyes froze on the next one. A woman, suffocated by a thick leather mask that covered her entire face. The description went on and on about the way the mask would constrict, each breath harder than the last, until there was no air left at all. My chest tightened, and for a moment I could feel the panic rising in my own lungs, a phantom sensation of suffocation. I quickly flipped to the next page, but the options only grew worse. Hanging by the neck, slowly losing consciousness in a pit of darkness, A knife pressed slowly into the abdomen, causing the slowest and most agonizing bleed out. Another that described the slow, drawn-out poisoning that left the victim in a delirious stupor for hours before death took them. I looked up, feeling nauseous, and met the man's gaze. He didn't blink. He didn't move.
Do you feel it?
He asked, his voice like ice.
The weight of each decision.
I turned the page again, more out of desperation and curiosity. The next section was a little different, still dark, but less immediate, more drawn out. A poison that worked over the course of days, leaving you weak and disoriented, but alive enough to feel every inch of your body deteriorating. A slow internal bleed where the victim would be able to walk, talk, think, but only for a little while before the bleeding overtook them completely. I didn't want to look anymore, couldn't take it, but something inside me compelled me to turn the page once more. And then, there they were, the last section, the most expensive, the least painful. I ran my fingers over the edges of the page, the paper feeling smoother, newer. The illustrations here were strange, almost serene. A man lying on a soft, grassy hill, eyes closed, a peaceful smile on his face, as if he were asleep. His death came slowly, like a sunset, gradual and quiet, as though he was simply slipping away into nothingness. The price listed beneath was astronomical, far beyond what I had expected to pay for any of this. It made the others seem like a bargain in comparison. The man's voice broke through the silence again.
You know what this means,
he said, his tone almost contemplative.
This kind of peace is bought with time. You must be certain that you want to leave it all behind.
I stared at the image, at the stillness, the calm, the relief that it promised.
Is it worth it?
I whispered, mostly to myself, but I wanted to hear him say it. He didn't answer immediately, he only watched me, his eyes reflecting something I couldn't quite place. Something almost like pity. The heavy silence pressing in around me. I can feel the weight of the decision, suffocating in its own right. The catalogue lay there, open in front of me, full of choices that seemed so final, so absolute. I had come here looking for a way out, for an end. I thought I wanted it. But now, with the weight of all the options in my hands, I realized something. I didn't want to choose. Not yet. I pushed the book back towards him, my fingers trembling as I did. I began, but the words felt weak, empty. I didn't know how to explain it. I think I'll pass. The man simply nodded, as if he'd known this would happen. The smile on his lips was faint, almost imperceptible.
Of course, he said. But remember, the door is always open.
I turned away, the doorbell chiming softly as I stepped back into the street. The chill of the air felt sharper now, like the world outside had become more real again. I didn't look back as I walked away, but something stayed with me. The strange feeling I hadn't escaped, that the shop would always be there, waiting.